All right, so let's look at Jenkins. So Jenkins is the pretty much the industry standard for continuous integration. There's quite a few other products that are out there. Heroku has its own continuous integration product, and you're welcome to try that out. If you are using something other than Jenkins, please let us know. I know there's a couple of teams that already have continuous integration set up. Please see the TA. Let them know that that you are using a particular product. Create accounts for the TA so that they can log into your continuous integration and verify that you have this set up. So please work with them. Otherwise, we are going to be using a Jenkins instance that has been already set up for us. We also welcome you to try this out locally on your machine. Jenkins is just a plain old Java web application that you can download as a WAR file and run it locally on your machine. Your question? No? Also, because some of the features that we're going to go over here are not available to you in the Jenkins instance that we're going to be using. All right, they're accessible only if you're an administrator. Right, so some of the security stuff that we're going to be talking about today, right, they're not available to you as a developer, and since you don't have admin rights. Okay, so there's some of the things that are going to be turned off for you. Nevertheless, I'm going to describe them and talk about them since it's a good skill to have anyway. So I invite you to download the WAR file and try it out locally on your machine, just to follow along some of the concepts that we're going to discuss here. It's very easy. Some of the examples that we're going to be looking at today, they're going to be referring a lot about pipelines and jobs. Right? Pipeline is a terminology that is common in Jenkins that captures the idea that going from source control all the way to deploying it to production is somewhat as a pipeline, right? That there's many steps that have to occur, logical steps that have to occur, in a particular sequence that go all the way from source control all the way to deployment, and that the pipeline has different steps that depend on each other, right? That the first step has to be successful before I go on to the next step, right? I first need to make sure that I'm be able to check out all the content from a master branch. I then need to be able to compile it. I then need to be able to run the tests, and then I need to be able to package it, and then I need to, and so on and so forth, right? And it makes no sense to, be able to skip some of those tests or some of those steps, or that if a previous step was aborted or was unsuccessful, that I might want to abort the entire process. So pipelines capture this idea of all these large logical steps. Now, typically, there's a couple of ways that we can define these pipelines. They can be pipelines is just static ASCII code that captures command line commands that you would write at the terminal, and using the particular shell command lines that you would use for your particular operating system. And you can either copy and paste them in the UI, or instead you can provide a file, usually referred to as a Jenkins file, that normally it would live as a source code text file as part of your source control, right, at the root of your source control. By default, that's the name, Jenkins file, and it's by default is expected to be at the root of your source control. So let's create a simple pipeline just to illustrate the point. And here I have Jenkins up and running. This is the URL we're asking you to use to create your pipelines, and there will be a folder that will be for your particular organization, right? And you'll only have access to that particular folder. Inside of the folder, you can do whatever you want, but you can't get out of that folder. So within that folder, you'll be able to create new pipelines, new item, and here it says hello, section 3. Right, and say I want to create a new pipeline. Say OK, and within within the configuration of that pipeline, there's all sorts of things that you can configure. Like for instance, when does this pipeline run? Right? When does it run? You can make it dependent on other pipelines, right? So if that pipeline is successful, then I want to run. Right? So you can string them together. You can connect it so that maybe every half hour goes out to GitHub and checks to see if there's anything new. If there's anything new, then it'll run the pipeline, grabbing the content and compiling it. This is very common, right? If it's in a QA environment, you might have a QA environment, checking to see if there's any new check-ins or any new merge into the master branch every half hour, every hour, every 2 hours, whatnot, right? So that to make sure that QA environment always has the very latest, right? So that folks can go in and test, or you can just kick it off manually, right? So we're going to look at manually first, and down here is where you can type in what that script might look like. In our case, let's do something really simple as a hello world. So let's copy that, and if we paste that, we can notice that there's a command line there that would very common written at the terminal of some operating system, and we can save that. Once you save that, you go to a dashboard for the pipeline you just created. And from there, you can just run that pipeline right now and just build. And basically, what it'll do is it'll parse that text, and down below it'll keep track of how many times has this script run. Right? As right now, it's only been run one time, the very first time, and you can navigate to the details of that one particular run, and you can look at well, what did this do? When this ran in the remote operating system, what did it do? So you can look at the console output and see that echo was actually that executed, and this was the output of the console that it actually ran. Right, the shell command actually ran. If this were a Java piece of code, the command might have been maven clean install, right? And then you can look at the source the output here and see how it went out to fetch all the maven jar files, right? It copied them to a local M2 folder, perhaps, and then it ran all the tests, and you could see everything you would do manually if you ran it in your local terminal, okay? And all the tests and whatnot. But what we want to do is automate this, right? We don't want to have to do this manually, right? We want to give all this boring part to an automated system. All right, so that's our very first pipeline. Let's you can build it now, and so let's talk more about pipelines.